And so, okay, so that's that next stage where we can have some fear, some panic. We can find ourselves shopping for pain, searching for safety. We get in a disorientation, the what about. Now, this next grouping, it's the loneliness, the isolation, maybe it's depression 2.0.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And maybe if we had anger turned outward the first time instead of anger turned inward, or anger turned inward and now we're revisiting it.
Yep.
And also this word shame. What could I have done to prevent this? And boy, that's a big one.
Well, I say, as you know, shame, S-H-A-M-E, is self-hatred at my expense. There's a little self-hatred in it, and it cost me a lot. So in the shame is, maybe I was 1% to blame. When you're grounded and when you're connected to truth and to community and God, no, that's not, I don't want to own the other person's stuff, but I might doubt it in a moment of weakness. And I think of Nehemiah, and we may use this again, but when Sanballat and Tobiah are there, they came to cause confusion among God's people who are just trying to rebuild their lives. They said they came to attack them, try to kill them, but to cause confusion. I can do that to myself and be my own internal, like Sanballat and Tobiah from Nehemiah, and cause confusion. When, Lysa, when we're talking, I'm grounded. I know that's not true, but some moment disconnected from community, maybe disconnected from God, I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe there's a chance I was somewhat at fault.
Right.
Disoriented thinking even right there.
And I think it's healthy to examine in certain situations, is there a part of this I need to own? I think that's healthy.
Always, yes.
But we don't want to own what is not ours to own. And I think sometimes that can be the source of our shame. And it can also be the source of the depression. It's like there was nothing I could do about this. So it can almost start to give you the sense there's nothing I can do about anything. Yeah. And we can take that to an extreme. I think in this season, the loneliness, Jim and I just did a session on this week.
Did we?
You're not outing me. I'm outing me, okay? Because he'll say I cannot confirm or deny what we talk about in our sessions. So for me, the loneliness sometimes feels like I'm going backwards instead of moving forward, because it's almost like all these other stages, there was energy around it. And now in this stage, things seem to get a little quieter. It's like life is moving on for other people. The intensity of the trauma is no longer there. And this sense of loneliness, it's like at the end of the day, I am at the center, the epicenter of this.
True.
And other people, they felt the effects of the hurt and the pain, but I'm the one going to bed alone every night. And so this loneliness has been something that, and for me, sometimes I do kind of go backwards because this isn't a linear progression. It's not like I'm going to check off these boxes.
Yep.
Sometimes the loneliness gets me all the way back into the shock, the numbness, the almost denial, like I can't believe this.
And that's why, at least, all this stuff is cyclical. If you don't hear anything else I say, folks, on this, is give yourself permission that it's linear sometimes, and we want it to be linear, but it's often cyclical. You're not going backwards. You're just going around the track one more time, and maybe you come out a little different, a little wiser, a little better. But it's often cyclical, and even in the cyclical, unpredictable. Now I'm going to predict and figure out the cycle. No, don't waste your time doing that.
I'm trying to see the loneliness as a gift.
There you go.
And see it as a season of I get to, not I have to, but I get to sit with myself. And I think there's some health around that, of being able to sit with myself. And so many times it happens for me late at night because, it gets to be a certain hour and there isn't a friend you can call. Right. It's just not appropriate, right? And I don't want to turn on the TV because I don't want to always just numb out and distract myself. Yeah. So that's my sitting alone with myself time. And I get to choose what I do with that time. They say time heals all wounds. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think time, what we plant in that time will determine if the wounds are healed or if they continue festering.
That's good.
So, okay, so that's that. Then the next stage, it's either a resisting of life moving on or and embracing and accepting that life is moving on, like accepting the reality life is moving on, and I need to continue to progress through this. Yeah. So we can sit in that resistance, or we can have a certain persistence, like keep going. Yeah. Life is moving on, and so do I need to.
That's where Robert Frost, the poet, said 3 words he's learned about life is, seems so simple, but it is not simplistic. He said, what I've learned about life is it goes on. And I think there is, matter of fact, I'm confident in my own grief and loss of parents and a sister killed in a car wreck with their 3-year-old twin daughters. I've told that story on this program before. Is there's a sense, but if life really moves on and I move on with it, is there's a sense that the person who hurt me got by with it. They got by with it a long time ago. Secondly is that I guess this is what do I do to go on? It means there's no more just circling in grief. And I've got to figure out, because it's also medicating to stay, very medicating to stay in anger turned outward or inward or shopping for pain. It's very neurochemically medicating in the brain. So it goes on to say, well, then this is the next chapter of my life, and to create your word, a new normal, I don't know how to do that. And there's that confusion around that.
Mm-hmm. And I think we have to keep our sights set on that. The fact that this hurt doesn't just have to be a pointless pain.
Yeah.
Because there's always other humans going through this. Yeah. And if we can learn to move through these, the people that are back at the beginning, I mean, we don't have to be all the way through it, but we can speak life into the other people that are trying to move through it, and we can encourage them, and that will give some purpose beyond the nothingness of this horrible pain.
Paul addressed that directly, didn't he? That the compassion that we get during our time, that we then will be able to go, and you've got street cred to go and say, not, I know exactly how you feel. No matter what, you never know exactly, but I could say, I will share. I like compassion. Com means with, passion to suffer with my own story, not in a way that's futile, but to be able to say, I've entered and I've walked. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for you are with me, God. I'm not really alone. And the idea of saying that I will be with others and sit with them, maybe sit shiva like the Jewish people do for a minute, but then I say, you open to a thought of when I went through my dark valley, how I went through? Yes. Most people are never going to a therapist. We need all kind of little therapeuos in Greek, little healers, don't we? Yeah. But so you could sit and say, Joe, how'd you get through that? Yeah. And you say, well, I'll tell you.
Yeah, and this was modeled first by Christ.
Yeah.
Christ doesn't ever ask us to do anything that he himself has not done. And so why is it necessary for Jesus to be our faithful high priest in Hebrews that was tempted in every way, that suffered every week? I mean, it's not an option of his suffering. It was a necessity that he suffered. Yeah. Why? I think it's for this very reason, Lysa, so that we have in our Messiah the assurance that that Jesus went through this. And so why is it so important that we have the presence of his Spirit now to comfort the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete, the Comforter? It's often in the New Testament, it's called the Spirit of Christ. Why do we have the Spirit of Christ? It's because the same pain that Jesus has gone through, that he can now be with us to comfort us as we go through, and we can be an agent of comfort unto others that will walk through similar types of pain and trauma in their lives.
Yeah, and I think it's crucial that we remember Jesus was sinless, but he was very much sinned against. And so he knew the gravity and the grit of human emotion when traumas happen. Yeah. Okay, so then we have this resisting moving on, or persisting and accepting that we're moving on. And then we have this next stage, which is re-entry and not rebound. So big difference, right? Rebound, Jim, is what?
That's going to put me redoing what I've done before, because what I don't work out in the previous relationship or whatever ended, I will be likely to carry that with me and act out in a new relationship, let alone attract unhealthy dynamics from another unhealthy person. So I'm just literally, like that rubber band you talked about earlier, I'm rebounding in. I'm not walking circumspectly, an old King James word. I'm not walking wisely. Yeah. I'm just literally rebounding right back into something, and that's just like a ricochet. I don't want to do that.
And so for those people who have been through a trauma where a relationship has ended, a rebound would look like, I just want to find another relationship quick.
I'm not going to sit at my house lonely and alone. I'll just, nature abhors a vacuum, so I'm going to fill it quick.
And you have some suggestions around that because, sometimes people can say, okay, well, how long? And I think the question is not so much how long do I need to wait, but it's a combination of the time plus what you're doing with that time.
Yeah.
Read my mind. That idea is, there's research that would say when a relationship ends, especially if it's a marriage relationship, take about a year. And during that time, what do you do in that time? Do some counseling. Get in and say, Proverbs 20, verse 5, the purposes of my heart are deep waters. Go down deep and draw them out. Look at what am I carrying with me out of that relationship? What are the facts and the impact of that relationship and the relational trauma that happened? So I tell people, okay, don't worry about the research. Can you at least wait 6 months, not a year? It is my experience that so many Christians who I've counseled, they had a marriage breakup, a divorce, or just they're dating or something long term, and they jump right back in and they don't do the work, that messy middle work to go, let me understand what did I learn from this? What's the impact on me? And again, it's a sense I cannot abide being alone. Blaise Pascal, we've said before, said it this way, great philosopher and mathematician, all of our problems, here we go, all of them stem from the inability to sit alone with yourself quietly in a room. You talked about it redemptively, to sit alone and say, what's going on in my internal world? Nehemiah talks about this in chapter 5. It's important. I just steal one verse. He said, and so I took counsel with myself. You got to learn to coach yourself and say, hey, buddy, hey, man, what's going on here? You got this. This is what's going on. Jesus, I'm with you during this time. But people will waste that time, that season, to rebound and go right in. You've wasted a little bit of a wilderness experience that great things could happen in. It's great things.
Exactly right.
And one of the things I think that we've got to be careful of is not going right back and choosing someone, again, that maybe we wrongly chose in the first relationship, or maybe there was some behaviors that we got used to, and those traumatic behaviors somehow in our brain have become more normalized. And so we may overlook things and get into another traumatic relationship. So that for me is what I'm constantly cautioning myself, is just, Lysa, you don't want to go back and choose the trauma that for a season felt more normal than it ever should have.
Well, after we all fly and take a trip, I mean, it's simple and maybe a bit silly, but don't you come home? I always do. Do you come home and unpack your dirty clothes? I mean, we do that. Some people, it's like being at Charlotte Douglas International Airport, and you've seen every now and then you've been out there, and whose bag that is? It just keeps going around until the person comes in. And it's like, unpack your baggage and sit with the person and say, what do I need to learn? And what was my old normal? I want to create a new normal. At least unpack your bags and go, yeah, that's this and that's that, right? It's a simple concept.
I've got a bag of clothes I got to unpack right now. I'm sorry, Jim.
Confession. I'm so glad someone else is confessing besides
I
you
didn't
here.
know
I'm
that.
confessing.
So,
I didn't mean to get too
Britt
real.
has been on me. And so I'm going to do that now.
so instead of rebounding, we want to have re-entry. And so
And
this
rebuilding.
is and
even.
rebuilding.
Yes.
And so that's continuing to move on. So we're ready maybe for new friendships. Maybe we're ready for new opportunities. Maybe we're ready for new experiences in our life.
What about new boundaries?
And new boundaries.
We'll do a whole other program, I know, coming up on that, but to be able to say, here's my boundary. That's to keep me safe. I've learned and said, no, you don't get to talk to me that way. Or if you do, I won't be. That's the beauty of ending a relationship. And so I get to start on my own contract with myself first, with God, and say, I know in a relationship, this is okay with me. Hey, this is not okay with me. And here's what I might be willing to negotiate. What a time for new wine and new wineskins and having new boundaries.
And eventually new relationships.
That are healthy and built on the right foundation.
Exactly. And then that gets us into our very last stage, which is really discovering the new you.
I love it.
And finding redemption and purpose in what happened. The trauma that happened doesn't have to be pointless pain. It can absolutely be really a new thought of purpose for your life to go then and help other people who are experiencing this trauma. And like we said, these aren't boxes to check. This isn't just a linear situation. You may cycle through this, but the point is moving through it with God and with other healthy individuals. So thank you guys for helping us unpack this.